I would define archaeology as looking through the earth and trying to find evidence of past history.
I know what bones is, so I know it from that.
The TV show?
Yes.
I think it's something to do with like plants and stuff, is it?
Digging stuff up from ancient civilizations.
Archaeology is the study of past human life through the things that were left behind. Contrary to popular belief, archaeologists do not study dinosaurs or fossils. We're interested in past daily life, both in distant places like Egypt or Greece, but also in our own backyard here on the Gulf Coast. We've been investigating the history of Mobile through the I-10 Mobile River Bridge Archaeology Project, an effort to excavate 15 sites before the widening of the I-10 bridge across Mobile Bay.
You think that the history of Mobile has already been written, and that it has been written, but from a certain viewpoint and from a certain angle.
And through those sites, I think we can tell a new history of Mobile. And it's not that the histories in the past haven't been accurate, but they don't necessarily have the full breadth and the full set of information that we're going to have. So I think that the history we're going to be able to tell is perhaps richer than what's been able to be told in the past, and will draw upon more data sources. So we're excited to do that.
How it first started. I mean, we know that it was a French settlement, but how did it get started and how did it spread out?
I'm very interested in Mobile's history, so I'd want to know about the founding fathers and the founding architecture and the founding structures.
Like, what are you working on now? Like, why is that important for us to know? Like, where is it coming from? Like, those kind of questions. How does it help us now learning about that?
Archaeology has the power to answer all these questions and more. For example, it can tell us about how Mobile's population grew and changed through time, and how humans have modified our environment to create the landscape we see today. It can also tell us unwritten stories.
As we excavate at various sites, what we're seeing is that we do have an archaeological record that gives us an understanding of different times in the past in Mobile. So we have some richness that we're excited about.
You know, on some of those sites, the window into the period, the contact period and the colonial period between Native American interactions and these early European interactions is present. And that's a really interesting culture context situation, because ultimately we're doing archaeology to help understand how we work as humans or look into future problems.
I work with taking historical maps and other resources and bringing them together in a GIS database, which is Geographic Information Systems. We can then identify what is in the specific sites that we're working at, and then we can also tie that together with any sort of resources that are place-based, like any census records, any of the city directory data, so then we can understand the people that actually lived in the sites as well. But I really love being able to bring the historical resources like the census data into the mapping and then look at those trends and patterns and see just how these neighborhoods grew over time.
Humans have modified this landscape so dramatically that today what I take as solid ground, and I would assume was solid ground 400 years ago, 1,000 years ago, was anything but that. And that drives home to me this lesson that we have this impact on our environment, and in the immediacy of when we had that impact, we fill in this so we can have better shipping out of Mobile, and dry land is good. And then you see 4 inches of rainfall, and that rain has nowhere to go but to flood our streets. And then you think about the impact of a hurricane, we have to worry about unintended consequences. So the human impact on the environment and thinking generations into the future is something that has been impactful for me.
You can see just here specifically people filling in the marshland just to make more land that's usable. And so we'll have layers of rubble, brick, wood, dirt that's just been piled in.
We have a historical record that is incomplete, so we know a lot about the storms that impacted Mobile, usually directly, but storm deposits in the archaeological record allow us to kind of splice time up a little better. It can tell us about how the landscape was shaped and where the sediment was coming from. If French or British or Spanish colonialists dug this out to convey water or perhaps to move water about in a landscape, at some point in time, these deposits here with the mixed in lighter grays represent storm surge deposits, and they run all down through these trenches. And then at some point after one of the hurricanes, this area set again and became a marsh and was capped off by the marsh and then capped by historical fill.
If you go to most libraries or archives and Google Down the Bay, you're not gonna get any results. There's a lot of history down the bay that hasn't been written down, unfortunately. And so through the oral history, we are capturing stories that have yet to be written.
My aunt, Melina McCants, was talking to me about life in Down the Bay in the mid-20th century. She just sort of began to wax poetically about Texas Street as a business corridor and the different types of businesses and the people who own the businesses. And I was looking here going, where's all that stuff now?
We can add their oral history to the artifacts we're finding to help weave a more full story of how they lived, how were they motivated, why did they make some of the decisions they made. Not only does it tell us more about the history of these people, but it also tells us about how people do things, how people make decisions.
Mobile is a typical American city, and it is sort of a microcosm of the major changes that this country has gone through. And there's growing pains still with this country. We talk about being a post-racial country, but we also, I think, realize that there are plenty of racial tensions that we have in various places in various ways. So we need to understand the history in our past in order to come to grips with it and make for a better future.
I think having stories, whether they be oral stories, written stories, geographical stories, maps, things that can be used to tell a broader picture of the history of our state. And as a lifelong Alabamian, I'm a big fan of the state of Alabama. I think it's one of the greatest, most diverse, both socially and specifically environmentally diverse state in the nation. So I think there's a lot that could be benefited from this.
It's extremely important because you learn everything from history.
Oh, definitely, like 100%. Because if we don't know where we've been, we can't help fix our futures. So everything we did in the past dictates how we do now, so.
Yes.
Why?
Because you get to learn about different cultures and different things about those cultures.
Absolutely, yeah.
Why do you think it's important?
Well, if you don't know where you've been, how do you know where you're going?